Vote Common Good. Thanks for being with us today to watch Juneteenth Faith and Freedom documentary. Before we get into watching the film, I want to have a chance to introduce you to the host of the film, the director, and one of the people who plays an important role in the film. I think it'll make it a little bit more personal and, if possible, even more powerful of an experience for you. You're going to hear from Rasool Berry. He's the host of the film. Rasool's name actually means messenger in Arabic. You'll see that name really captures who he is. He has a degree in African American Studies and Sociology from the University of Pennsylvania. He's the teaching pastor at the Bridge Church in Brooklyn, New York, and he actually works for the organization Our Daily Bread, which is the group that put this documentary and film together. You're also going to meet Yaki Smith. He's the director of the film. He's known for many of his great, powerful films for this unflinching and voracious style of storytelling. That's how he describes it. Yaki is the Associate Professor of Film and Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Moody College of Communication at the University of Texas at Austin. He's an award-winning filmmaker with this direct, powerful, unflinching style, which you'll see come to life here in this documentary. You're also going to meet Michael Waters. Michael plays an important role in the content of the film. Michael is a part of our Vote Common Good world in a lot of ways. He's one of our speakers. He's a trainer with us. He's a consultant and, frankly, just a really good friend. Dr. Michael Waters is the founder and lead pastor of the Abundant Life African American Methodist Church in Dallas. He's also a professor and an award-winning author, including books for children, and he's a leading activist in issues of justice. So here's my conversation with them. Now, I talked with Rasool and Yaki for more than an hour. We only have a portion of that interview here for us today. And I also talked to Michael for more than an hour. Both of those full interviews will be available on our YouTube channel and on our podcast. So if you're interested in hearing more from them about putting together this film and what they think about the issues related to it, you'll have a chance to watch those there. So here's my interviews with Rasool, Yaki, and Michael Waters.
My own understanding of history and what I was taught in school was that the Emancipation Proclamation that came into effect January 1st, 1863, was the end of slavery in the country, right? And then to discover, well, actually, that's not really the case. Well, first of all, 1863 is right in the middle of the Civil War. It's not like the Confederate States read Lincoln's emancipation and go, oh,
Wow.
the president whom we're rebelling against tells us we need to, end slavery. So, okay. Dr. Carrie Lattimore, who says that, basically it transforms the Union forces into a freedom force, which was before they were just about keeping the Union together regardless, but now it's like, okay, repurposed or clarified in this vision and to end slavery. And so, but that only goes as far as its troops can allow it to go. And so that takes a while to get to Texas. But the other thing I learned in the context of doing the documentary was, because at one point people asked, well, why are we celebrating something that happened in Texas? But the reality is so many enslavers moved and migrated to Texas to avoid that Union freedom force, that Texas ends up becoming almost like this epicenter of people who were really so committed to slavery that they would move from Virginia, from Alabama, from Georgia to Texas to be in this kind of bastion, this last stronghold of slavery. And so Juneteenth acknowledges the day that General Gordon Granger and troops, the majority of whom were Black troops, which is significant, arrived in Galveston, Texas, which at that point was the Dallas of its day. It was the biggest city. It was and of course, a lot of that bigness had to do directly with the wealth that it got from the cotton and rice and a lot of the agriculture that came on the backs of slaves. And so when these troops arrive, they came in mass, and as Sharon Gillen says so profoundly in the film, they did not come to inform, they came to enforce. And that's a big misnomer that oftentimes, gets out there, and that Yaki alluded to, that this idea that, and it's so strange when you really stop to think about it, when people say it was the day that like enslaved people found out that they were free. It's like, wait a minute, why would they, what they know even matter? It's not like that, they were just staying there by their own will. No, it was the day that the Union was able to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. And still, even though that
Mm,
doesn't end slavery in the country, because states that didn't secede from the Union, like Kentucky or Delaware, um, they still had slaves. And it's not until months later, when the 13th Amendment is ratified, that you really can see a kind of total abolition experience. However, there is something very significant about the particular stronghold, that place where the Confederacy had dug in its heels and said that we're owning these people, and other people had gone to migrate there to say we're going to enslave these people. It's something about the significance of that place, that
mm.
stronghold being demolished, that I think gives us an opportunity as a nation to reflect on the significance of the end of slavery as a nation. The key moment was being able to connect with Yaki and as a director, and beginning to work with him, and that's really where things took off. And I mean, the time frame was amazing. We met in February, um, shot in March to early April, edited in May, and put it out in June,
Hmm.
which is just an extraordinary turnaround. And but and I think God's hand was on it from the beginning. So I'm really excited for the project, and to see now other people get to experience it and hear the story too.
Yeah, yeah, Key, I'm interested in that piece of it for you as a director, right? Your storytelling. How much did you, growing up, know about Juneteenth yourself? Like, is this something you've had sort of been inhabited in your life as you were growing up? Were you discovering things about this new national holiday yourself as you were, tasked with being the director?
Well, it's both, right? So first and foremost, Juneteenth has always played a huge part in my life. Ever since I can remember, honestly, we celebrated Juneteenth.
Hmm.
We had the parades, the barbecues, the picnics, the church services, just the whole shebang. And so for me, when I would encounter somebody who didn't know what Juneteenth was, I was like, "What you mean you don't know what Juneteenth is?" Because I just thought everybody knew what Juneteenth was.
Hmm.
And so when Rasool came to me, and said, "Hey, we want to make this film. I want to make this film too, because for one, there are too many people that don't know what Juneteenth is, and two, it's another way for me to celebrate and honor my ancestors, which is what we've been doing again my entire life. It's a way to get their story out. It's a way for us to tell their story through their lens, because a lot of times people tell these narratives and they don't get the facts right, and they're telling them from a very different perspective than what we're going to tell the narrative. And so for me, it was very important to get involved in this, because I feel like I'm giving a gift to my state, right? I'm giving a gift to the United States of America, because again, this is a new federal holiday, and I know even now people are like, "What, Juneteenth federal holiday? What is that?" They're still discovering that,
Right.
and so this is really a way to allow them to be educated on what Juneteenth is, so they can understand why it's important to celebrate. You know, although I have celebrated this holiday, as I said, for as long as I can remember, there was so much that I was learning along the way as we were putting this film together, and it made me want to even go back and learn more about my own family history, right?
Mm.
And I hope that when people watch this, that they understand that if you do not know the past and you do not honor the past, right, that you are going to be forced to repeat it. And I feel like that's why we are where we are now.
Was there something about this story that for you as a filmmaker really captured you, that you thought, okay, this is important to communicate? A lot of people don't know about it. And a lot of people watching this with us tonight, they're going to be thinking, yeah, I didn't know what Juneteenth is. In fact, I'm around a lot of white people, and we sort of say it quietly that we didn't know what Juneteenth was, right? It's kind of embarrassing. Like, I don't know. And because I know for a lot of, at least white people that I know, the shorthand for Juneteenth is, well, that's the national holiday where we celebrate the end of slavery. Like, they don't even know about the movement of the message or the troops having to come and so on. But they're just thinking, okay, it's the end of, like, we have a day now where we recognize that. We recognize the end of slavery. And I'm sure for a lot of people, they feel like, well, it's a little late for that. And also, that just feels like a really long time ago. Can you
Mhm.
talk a bit about that? Okay, yeah, please. Russell.
Man, yeah, that, and this is where talking to people who know their history, and like Yaki alluded to, it was really amazing and inspiring to see how much people everyone that we talked to in Texas that was connected with this holiday, they could just tell you, you know, from memory, the details. Importantly, as you watch the film, you'll see how it's a living history that people are still living with right now.
Just to add on to that, I think we have to always acknowledge that we are still living with the vestiges of all of that trauma.
Yeah.
It's still with us, right? And you see it in the way in which we treat each other, right? I mean, when you think about a white young man who decides that he's going to go literally drive hours to find a black grocery store to gun down black people. He didn't just go into a random grocery store. He chose that store, right? Yeah, some people look at that and say, oh, it's been 100 some years. That's nothing. To your point, Rasool, when you look at our American experience, 150 years is nothing. To be honest with you, I'll never forget, I was doing a photo shoot at the Majestic Theater in San Antonio, and I was sitting down on the bottom, and my mom pointed up, and she said, you see up there? And I'm looking, I couldn't even see it. She says, way up there, that's the balcony. And my mom's 65. That's the balcony that I had to sit in when I was a kid, and we would come here to watch film.
Yeah.
That ain't that long ago. My mom only 65. Right. And so we got to remember these things are not that far removed. And if we continue to act like that happened so long ago, so people need to get over it, again, we're going to keep repeating it over and over again.
This is a film that in a lot of ways is visual, but it's also, it's a soundtrack, right? You hear voices, you hear storytelling. Can you talk a bit about the soundtrack and the music and the quotes and the things that, when people watch the film, they're going to be experiencing, but might not always know to pay attention to and to notice?
Yeah, I mean, I can start off. And
I'm gonna let you go. This is why he has to talk about this, because as we were editing this thing, he would always be like, we got to get some more sound. We got to, pull out the story. So he had a very great vision and perspective on that. So
well, it shows. It's really quite stunning. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me from the beginning, it was very important not only for us to sort of see what was happening on screen, but for us to feel right that history as we are sort of hearing people retell it to us. And throughout the piece, I was always thinking about this idea of like, what can we do to make sure that people feel like they are living in and walking with and actually experiencing what these individuals experience. There's a difference again between hearing somebody actually talk about history, but also if you're there and you're feeling history, it's a completely different experience. And so for me, throughout the whole thing, I was always wondering, like, okay, where are those moments where we can put, again, sounds of former slaves, which we have, some great audio, sounds where we can actually create soundscapes of war, soundscapes of people working, the sound of water, the sound of a boat coming through, the sound of a ship, the sound of feet walking on the shore. All of those things are so important, again, because I think it allows the audience into the sort of psychological headspace of someone who endured this pain and this trauma. But from the beginning, we knew that the soundtrack, right, what you heard and what you hear was going to play just as much of a sort of narrative arc as what you actually see on screen.
And I will add one other piece to that. When I think about the soundtrack from the standpoint, we do have an album that is coming out as well that features Lecrae, but was very much is the main person contributing is Sho Baraka, who's an artist who's long integrated faith and justice and social commentary, and is one of my favorite artists. And so it was amazing that he signed on to do this. And so we're going to have the first full album that's kind of committed to telling the story explicitly of Juneteenth in a variety of ways. Hip hop, gospel, poetry is all kind of in the mix, and so we're excited about that too.
And I just want to add something to that real quick. Like I have to say that Rasool really sort of, kind of curated all of that music, which I thought was excellent, and was bringing that music. Even when we were shooting, you already had some of that music. And so then afterwards, we kept getting more and more music, and it was just a matter of figuring out where that music fit in. But I so appreciated that Rasool had already been thinking about, okay, I want this kind of maybe hip hop soundtrack mixed with this and these spirituals and sort of these blues, and just finding a way to link the past and the present. And I think the music really helps to do that just as much as the overall storyteller.
Yeah, it definitely has a power to it in the way that the music lays in. And I was glad to see that there's resources that go along with this film, discussion guides, uh,
Mhm.
devotional books, which for people that don't know what that is, in some traditions you get little material that you spend time with each day, and right, it's often called a devotional. So a devotional book is put together, and albums, and like a soundtrack that you get for it, because you all really see this as not just a film, right? You see it as a piece of communication overall. That's more than just the hour and 15 minutes that someone's going to spend watching. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I
I mean,
look at
I
it as yeah, I'll just say real quick. I look at it as an opportunity for us to think through what do we do with this day, right? For those who weren't raised in the great state of Texas and understand just kind of intrinsically what what you do on Juneteenth, we thought we would, or even those who do, like we can contribute to information, to inspiration, and to really also telling a very important faith lesson, which is that the historical context of what happens to us as a people actually matters to God.
Hmm.
Like, and so this idea of freedom being something that happened. And the funny thing is, it's in our faith tradition already. Thank you so much for the opportunity to have us on. Yeah, this was actually really cool. Like, Yaki and I haven't had a chance to do this kind of a forum since we finished the film,
Wow.
yet. So this is an exclusive.
Ah,
Um,
right
you know,
on. Well,
but
you make a
really,
you make a good pair. You should do this more often. Uh,
yeah.
Hey, Michael, you're in the film. You play a prominent role, really helping the filmmakers to see the artifacts of slavery. And one of the things I was struck by is how your part in the film made slavery not feel like a past experience only, but also something that still lives in our current day. Can you talk a bit about how Juneteenth is not a holiday that tells us about the past? It's a holiday that tells us about our current situation.
Well, certainly, Doug. It's always great to be with you. I think there is a very strong case that can be made that chattel slavery never really ended, but it's gone through various iterations of its presence. And so, what we think of as slavery in terms of individuals held captive on a plantation, working for enslavers largely within the fields, that is an aspect of slavery. But then we transition almost very quickly from that aspect of slavery into the penance system, which is something we don't often talk about in America, of how through black codes, black people were arrested and forced to work in mines, forced to work in industry to help build up and reestablish some of our southern cities. And then you move from that into the era of mass incarceration. And arcing through all of that history is the 13th Amendment, which in its writing suggests that slavery has ended for all persons except for those who are incarcerated. And I do think we're in the era of mass incarceration. Our nation incarcerates more individuals than any other nation in the country, in the world, and that is by far, right?
Mm.
And so when I talk about slavery, I want to talk about its various iterations,
Hmm.
its foundation here in this nation, and how it continues to ensnarl bodies all across our land. I also think through the use of artifacts, and one of the ones that I used in the film was these chains,
Mm-hmm.
authentic chains from the auction in 1806. A slave seller by the name of W. Wilbur out of Charleston. I always believe that history is tangible. As someone who has led pilgrimages
Yeah.
with individuals through the Deep South, as someone who's gone on pilgrimage myself, one who's been fascinated with history, I always want to make sure that we know that this history is tangible. It's tangible in the sense that there are artifacts that we can engage, but it's also tangible in the sense that there are still harms that visit us daily
Hmm.
because of that history. But what I'm most proud of now is that it is becoming or has become, I should say, a global expression of
Mm-hmm.
liberty, right? It's not just black people, it's all Americans all across the country who have been commemorating and celebrating this day. It's persons across the world. There are Juneteenth celebrations in nations all over the world, and that does mean something. And I'm very proud of that. And I think it's a testament of the strength and commitment of our ancestors to persevere, right? And to fight and to make sacrifices. It's a testament to their hope, right? A hope that was hewn out of great tragedy, out of great trauma, and yet they still believed. And so, while obviously there's so much more work for us to do in this country and in this world, I think it's an open question as to whether or not we are fully free,
Mm-hmm.
right? I still don't want to miss the opportunity to celebrate the achievement and accomplishments of a people who believed, even when there was no evidence that they should believe otherwise, that things would change. That's a hope that I think is beneficial for us in many of our justice fights and struggles today. That you can't. It's not hope if you only have it once you have it, right? It's not hope if you only possess it once things
That's
have
a good
changed,
point.
right?
Right.
Hope is that powerful reservoir that allows us to keep going and keep pressing despite the tragedies that are before us, right? And so I see Juneteenth as a commemoration, obviously, of what was accomplished, but I also think of it as a pointing forward, right?
Mm.
That we would carry that same hope that our forebears did with us today and tomorrow so that we can change our nation and the world for the better.
All right. So there's this thing we tend to do as human beings, and we certainly do it in the United States, where some holidays, like July 4th, a lot of white people really see themselves in. So we'll have a July 4th celebration. Where I live, there'll be parades. We'll send off fireworks, and we will use language of the collective we. Somehow that we participated in the act of freedom in this country, a revolution, and we feel like we're all in on it and we should celebrate it. Then when it comes to slavery, some of those very same people say things like, well, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. So they weren't there at the revolution either, but they feel that it was a sense of we, and I should celebrate and commemorate nationally something that we're all going to participate in as if it was us. But then when it comes to slavery and other harms that have been done, we say, well, that wasn't me. Why would I have anything to do with it? And it feels like the power of Juneteenth is that it wants to pull the narrative of slavery, both the ending of it, the announcement of the ending, and the enforcement of the ending of slavery, into something closer to July 4th. Does that make any sense to you? Do you think about it like that at all?
I think that's a powerful reflection. I'm grateful that you offered it. There are a lot of people even today who struggle to celebrate July 4th because of this understanding of not being fully free. And I think of the tremendous words, oratory of Frederick Douglass, who asked the question very openly, to what is the Negro of July 4th, right? And so in this era where racial disparities continue to rise, as a matter of fact, we're at a point in this nation where wealth disparities between blacks and whites has never been greater other than during slavery. Isn't that something? We've never had a greater wealth disparity amongst black people and white people in this country other than during the times of slavery, right? So it's very hard for some to celebrate July 4th. There are some who, still remember the criticisms of Colin Kaepernick in his taking of a knee and the debacle around the national anthem, and who are very uh, uh, distrusting. They distrust the narrative of our nation and the fact that we are all respected and valued, even in the point of protest, those rights that should be given to us. At the same time, I know in particular that black people have fought in literally every single war that has been in this nation, including that Revolutionary War, right? And as we have fought to set others free globally,
Mm.
we've not always been afforded the same opportunities in this democracy. In fact, that was a great pain of a number of persons, including Medgar Evers, having gone across the waters and fighting during World War II and having an experience of liberty, if you will, in Europe that they did not experience at home, only to come back home uh, being treated as second class citizens. Another painful aspect of the history, which I think we must emphasize, is that there were black persons who were lynched and even blinded through assault as they continued to wear their military uniform.
Mm.
That is stunning to me. Having served and fought for this country, for liberty, for others across the world, returned to America and suffered great harm, right? So I see this very interesting tension with the date, and yet I don't want to release it, right?
Mhm.
I too am America, are the words heralded from Langston Hughes. I too sing America. And that's important, right? That we've been here, we've literally built this nation, the White House crafted by our hands,
Mm.
the U.S. Capitol crafted by our hands, the very design of Washington, D.C. crafted by our hands. It was our hands that harvested the crops from the soil. We have been here. And so it's something that I don't want to just sacrifice. Why I want to hold in tension the realities that we've not fully laid claim to all the freedom narratives that the nation has told us. I also know that if there's anything great about America, we've contributed to that greatness.
Mm.
And that's not something that I'm willing to sacrifice.
We hope you found those interviews to be powerful and helpful. We now have a chance to watch the film. If you're on the Vote Common Good page, you can scroll down and you'll see a player and you can watch it right here. If you're on our YouTube channel, you can look in the description for a link to the documentary and you can watch it there and share it with others. Well, happy Juneteenth, and thanks for being with us today.